Hi, my name is Rabbi Yosef Tropper, and I thank you so much for joining. This is a presentation, a four-part series entitled Unraveling the Scroll of Esther, and the four-part series will cover different themes. Just to go through, this is part one out of those four, and this is class one entitled Was Achashveirosh Sane? And each of these four classes will focus on one of the four mitzvahs of a day of Purim, this one focusing on the reading of the Megillah. Class number two is entitled Bridging Relationships. It's about Mishloach Manos. Class number three is called A Day of Prayer, which is about Matanos Levyonim, the gifts to the poor on the day of Purim. And the final class, class number four, is entitled Life of the Party, which is about fasting and rejoicing. So this first class will be an introduction to Megillah Esther, and we'll try to acquaint the reader with a lot of the themes and concepts. And again, it will also focus on the reading of the Megillah. I had a very good friend who did a very fascinating thing one Purim. It was a brilliant idea, it was a lot of fun, and it was hilarious. And what he did was he counted how many times it says Haman in the Megillah, and he wanted to be able to do something funny for each one of them. So he went around the yeshiva recording all different people laughing. Some of the Rabbeim, some of the students, some of the famous people, even the cook and the janitorial service. And we all, of course, knew each other and recognized people's voices. And what he did was he recorded them and he put them on a MP3. Each laugh got its own track. And some people he had them saying quotable quotes, like quick quips. And what he did was he put them all on tracks, and he got a huge speaker system, and he put them up. And every time he got to one of the Hamans, he would play another track, and people were laughing and rolling. It was hilarious. Instead of the regular banging, he had people laughing in all different voices, and it was, I admit that it was quite entertaining. There was only one problem. Right after the Megillah was over, I saw him run across the street to a different shul. And when he got back about an hour later, I said to him, "What happened?" So he told me, "Yeah, it was so much fun. Everything was great. I'm glad you guys all enjoyed, but I didn't end up hearing any of the Megillah." So he went across the street to go to shul to go hear it again, or for the first time. The purpose of Megillah, obviously, is to teach us a lesson, and we have to be very careful to hear every single word. And in fact, one could even ask, and this is the opening question, why is it so important to hear every word in the Megillah? What happens if I do miss one word? When we're in shul on a regular Shabbos and we miss a word, so nobody makes a big deal out of it, nobody goes back and asks the Balkari to read it, or from that point on till the end. We don't find such a thing. The only time we do is for Parshas Zachar, which is a Doraisa. The Torah tells us an obligation. We have to hear every single word. It says, Zachar, you have to remember, you have to hear every word. But where do we find Megillah, this concept, we have to hear every word? That's one question. Other questions are just the idea of what is the theme of the Megillah? Like what lesson are we supposed to take? Every year we hear it again and again. What lessons are we supposed to take out of the Megillah? And when we go through the Megillah, hopefully we're going to talk about practical lessons. That this was not just a story that happened in the past, it's a story that teaches us lessons about the present and the future, and how Hashem watches over Klal Yisrael and takes care of them. And I have a source sheet which I'll hopefully post towards this video, 3 major sources that I'll be discussing, but let's just go through each one. So the first pasuk starts off, Vayehi bimei Achashveirosh, Hu Achashveirosh. It was in the days of Achashveirosh. He was the Achashveirosh, Hamolech meHoduvad Kush, who ruled from a city of Hodu till Kush, Sheva ve'Esrei Medina, the famous 127 countries. So the question is that Vayehi bimei Achashveirosh would have been sufficient just to say it was in his time. Why does it have to repeat Hu Achashveirosh? He was Achashveirosh. That's redundant. Why does it say it again? And Chazal say that this is because Hu Achashveirosh mitchilaso v'ad sof. He remained the same person from beginning to end. So obviously they're trying to insult him, as they darshan other things of his name also. Achashveirosh, Achav shel Rosh, and they tie him to Nebuchadnezzar and say Ach barosho. People were upset whenever they heard about him. They would say, "Oh no, it's Achashveirosh." What's the insult? He was Achashveirosh from beginning to end. So what's the big deal? How do we understand what the insult is? And what's very interesting is the Medrash Rabbah, Bereishis Rabbah, 37.3 says the following thing. It says there are 5 times that the pasuk says who, and then it follows it by someone's name. This was a great person, 5 instances of great people. And there are 5 times that it says the word who and follows it by an evil person. And the Medrash enumerates, and it says, the 5 times that it says for bad people is who Gibor Tzayed, who Haya Gibor Tzayed Lefnei Hashem. We're talking about Nimrod, Harasha. He was a person that did trapping, and hu haya. It says the word hu by him. Another time it says is by Esav. Hu Dasan Vaviran is a third time. Hu Achaz, who was an evil king, and Hu Achashveirosh, which is our pasuk. And the 5 times for good, it says Hu Avraham, so it's by a good person. Hu Moshe, it says Hu Aaron. Hu Chizkiah, who was a great king, and Hu Ezra. And finally, Rav Chanan says that there's another pasuk, and that is the best out of all of them for good. And he says this is a 6th one. This is Hu Hashem Elokeinu. This is Hashem. And so what we learn here is that whenever it says the word who, it's telling us consistency. These people had consistency. And the defining factor of eccentric people and great people and evil people is their consistency. Consistently trying to do what they're trying to do. Meaning, if they're good people, then they're consistently pushing themselves to be good and to be great. And if they're evil people, then they're consistently doing bad and doing it more and more. And this is one of the biggest lessons that we have to understand. That in life, people that want to succeed need to have consistency. And people that do evil, it's an insult that look how much consistency they have and how much evil they do and how much they pursued it. And that's the insult of Hu Achashveirosh. But there's something even deeper, and that is that if we think about it, Achashveirosh was the one that had probably one of the most intimate knowledges about the entire miracle, how Hashem had allowed the Jews to get decreed to death, but yet miraculously behind the scenes saved them through Esther and the intervention of Mordechai, etc. And Achashveirosh knew this story, and yet still he began as Hu Achashveirosh, as this evil person, and maintained his life the same even after the entire miracle occurred. Nothing changed in his life. So that is a very sad thing, that Hu Achashveirosh, he went through this entire revelation of God and still maintained who he was and never changed and was inspired by it. That is the ultimate insult. And therefore, that's why we start with the Megillah saying that let's not be like Achashveirosh. When we read the Megillah and we learn the lessons, we should be inspired and carried further and not be like Hu Achashveirosh, that he remains the same. And that is one of the biggest lessons that we're supposed to take out of the Megillah. Another thing that's very interesting is that the Medrash says, Medrash Esther Rabbah says, that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemiah argue. And one says Achashveirosh, it's a very interesting thing. One says, Achashveirosh harag ishto b'mei o'avo. Achashveirosh killed his wife, referring to Vashti, because of his friend, referring to Haman, his advisor. Hu Achashveirosh, he is the same Achashveirosh, sheharag o'avo, he killed his friend, meaning Haman, b'mei ishto, because of his wife. So it's kind of funny. Achashveirosh killed his wife Vashti because of his friend Haman, and then he killed his friend Haman because of his wife Esther. Rabbi Nechemiah says he's also unpredictable because he's the Achashveirosh that Achashveirosh bitol molechas Beis Hamikdash. He stopped the Jews from rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash in his time. Hu Achashveirosh shegazer lav shibana, and then he decided that it could be rebuilt at the end of the story. So what is this? This is a game. Hu Achashveirosh, he was this person, and then he was that, he was this and that. The Gemara in Megillah even calls him Melech Hafach V'Chanaya. He was very unstable. He was always changing his mind. That's why it says that Esther invited Haman to the party and with Achashveirosh and herself because she wanted to get Haman decreed to be killed and have him killed immediately before Haman switched and changed his mind. But the Reb Chaim Friedlander Zatzal explains in his Ha'aras to Das Tfunos, which this is one of the biggest. He writes on the Ramchal's Sefer Das Tfunos that this is one of the biggest themes of the entire Sefer of Das Tfunos. That when Hashem does things, that he uses a shliach, he uses a messenger called Achashveirosh to fulfill his will, that Hashem says, I'm in charge here, and I want you to kill Vashti because I need to bring Esther here. And I want you to kill her because of the advice of your friend. Great. Bam. She's knocked off and she's dead. And then when it came time to save the Jews, Hashem says, I'm the one who's in control here. I'm going to have your wife convince you, Esther, convince you to kill Haman. So we see that Hashem is one who's behind all this. When Hashem does these things, that's the whole theme of Megillah. Benahapachu. Hashem says it looks like the Jews are all going to get killed. It looks like Haman's the one that's going to destroy them and have them decree that they're going to get killed. No, you're totally wrong. He wanted to lahashim laharag labed narav mitaf and ashim, etc. He wanted to kill out whole Jewish families. The exact opposite. I'm going to show you that Haman's going to get killed, and his 10 sons and his family will be destroyed. And that's the Benahapachu, which shows clearly that Hashem is one who's ruling. And the reason that Chazal tell us that we have to read every single word is because every single word here is part of the miracle. And as we go through it, I hope to point out some of the examples, but every pasuk is building the behind-the-scenes salvation that what Hashem did. And when we look at every detail, we are even more and more amazed by everything that we read. When we see how Hashem allows Vashti to be killed to make the ways in order to allow Esther to come in, and then to how eventually it ends up that Haman tries to tell the king that it's time to kill Mordechai, and specifically because of the time that he came and the dreams that Achashveirosh had been having before Haman arrived, and the fears and insecurities that were being played out in Achashveirosh's head, that ended up making it that, oh, you're trying to kill Mordechai, but he's the one that saved my life, and it made Haman look worse, and it put everything into motion to be able to bring out this miracle. And so therefore, when we read the Megillah, we're supposed to read the miracle in every single word and know and see how Hashem is guiding and ruling our lives. And the idea of Purim is not to get drunk and to forget ourselves and to do things that we're going to regret later. That's not at all the idea. As a mental health professional, I could certainly testify that alcohol addiction is a big problem, and we're not encouraging people to drink. However, the concept of nichnas yain yatsa sod, the idea of loosening up people, is in order to show them the reality of life. That when a person sometimes goes through the hustle and bustle of everyday life, he's distracted, and it's hard for him to be in touch with himself, and it's hard for him to really experience life. And so what Purim is a time of inspiration where we try to jumpstart ourselves to be happy and to be joyous and to let go and to look around with a real fresh pair of eyes and a real reality and ask ourselves who's really controlling our lives, and how much does Hashem have to do with us, and how much does He guide everything that's going on in our lives. And that comes sometimes, for some people, with a little bit of letting go and a little bit of realizing that it's not all me. I don't have to be in control. It's not me that's calling the shots. I don't have to know the difference between Ara Haman and Baruch Mordechai, because Hashem is one that's deciding who the tzaddikim are and who the leaders of our generation are and who the Rishonim are, who the evil people are that we need to be saved from. And that's Hashem who's making those decisions. And this is a very deep concept which I hope to discuss in the feasting and rejoicing section, which is the last one. But this is the basic idea. Chazal, the rabbis did not tell us to get drunk and to forget ourselves and to do regrettable actions. The rabbis told us to let go of our own perception of reality and to redefine how much God has to do with our lives. And finally, there's a brilliant thing from the Rokeach. The Rokeach brings down, the Rokeach was Rabbi Eliezer of Worms. He lived in 1176 and died in 1238. He says that the word Achashveirosh, Aleph Ches Shin Vav Resh Vav Shin, stands for a very fascinating thing. And I just want to take a tangent for a second, because you have to know this Gemara beforehand. The Gemara in Megillah 12b says that, was Achashveirosh a fool or was he a brilliant man? And the Gemara says that he first made a party, and the pasuk tells us that he invited everyone outside of Shushan. Shushan was the capital that Achashveirosh had made, and that's where he lived. And he didn't invite the people from Shushan. Instead, he invited the people from outside of Shushan first. And the Gemara says this is machlokas whether this was an intelligent political decision or an unintelligent. One opinion, it's machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. We don't know who says what. One of them, out of Rav and Shmuel, says that this was the stupidest thing, because it's the biggest insult that here his own townsfolk were not given a party, and yet he's inviting people from outside. So this was a very foolish thing. And the other opinion says that it was a brilliant thing, because if he just made a party for Shushan to celebrate his kingdom, then people would be offended from outside, and they're hard to appease because they don't live with him and they're not in his close vicinity. But instead, he decided that I'm going to make a party that's going to satisfy everyone, and then I'll make a specific party for Shushan in order to satisfy them and appease them. So this was a brilliant political move. To explain the exact intricacies and depth there is not relevant to this class, but the point is that there's machlokas whether he was an intelligent person or not. And I believe that putting the Gemara together about Hafachvachan, that he was a very flighty king, I think that they're both true. And sometimes we find this in brilliant people, that they do crazy things and stupid things. To say that Achashveirosh was a fool and an idiot would diminish the entire Megillah. To portray him that way would make, and as some presentations have done this before, really insults the intelligence of the entire story, because he was a powerful king, and yet Hashem controlled him and pushed things in order to be for the benefit of the Jews, in order to save the Jews. But to say that he was a brilliant person without fault is a big mistake. And I believe that the explanation is, the question of this class is called, was Achashveirosh sane? I believe that the answer is that, of course he was sane, but he had some insanity to him. he had some unhealthy habits to him. And the idea that we're supposed to understand is, like the Rokeach says, this is his exact name. Aleph, Ches, Shin, Vav, Resh, Vav, Shin stands for, Aleph stands for Ish, Ches stands for Chacham. He had some brilliance to him. He was a smart man. But then the Shin of Achashveirosh stands for Shota. He had some stupidity in him also. Upligi, Rav, Shmuel. And those are the Vav, Resh, Vav, Shin. Upligi, Rav, and Shmuel. And Rav and Shmuel argue about this, meaning that they're both true. Achashveirosh had some brilliant moments, and he had some crazy moments. And the Maharal brings down Medrash in Esther Abasi starts off, and it says that, thank you Hashem for saving us, even though B'kom Aleinu Adam, the pasuk says, when a man stood up against us, and the Gemara darshans velo melech, and not a king. So this is very odd. What does this mean? Like, this is the ultimate, the introductions are the explanation of the entire Megillah. So thank you Hashem for saving us from Adam, from Haman, Rashi explains on that piece, and not a king. So what the Maharal explains is that no king would want to get rid of the Jews because politically it would make them look bad. How can he do this? It would make them look bad in the eyes of the world. And monetarily, financially, the Jews run the country as they always have. So why would any king be willing to do that? Only a simpleton like Haman, who didn't have the country to worry about, who wasn't in charge, who didn't have the financial burden on his head, only a fool like that would be willing to actually go through with it. So, of course, Achashveirosh had a certain foolishness to him, that he wanted to kill the Jews also, but he knew that politically it wouldn't go over. And even when he killed Vashti, the Medrash says that he lost a lot of his popularity. And it was only once he remarried Esther that people came back and were happy with him again. So we see that when we read the Megillah, there's so much to learn about who Achashveirosh. Achashveirosh maintained his same stupidity and lack of seeing Hashem's hand in his life. And that's exactly why we have to listen to every single word in the Megillah and learn the lesson and the beauty of how Hashem runs and controls our lives and guides our lives. Hashem put us in this world to succeed and to become great people. And that's the biggest, ultimate lesson of Megillah Esther that we're supposed to take. Was Achashveirosh sane? He had moments of clarity and he had moments of insanity. And that's who Achashveirosh. He remained the same. But when we read the Megillah, we're inspired, and we read it twice every year. We read it once at night and once during the day. Again, Chayav Adam, to hear the Megillah, each person must hear the Megillah, l'shanoso, and to repeat it. And that's why we repeat it. The biggest insult is Hu Achashveirosh, that he wasn't a changed person. The biggest compliment is Lahudim Ora, that we have the light and the inspiration when we hear the Megillah and allow it to penetrate our hearts and show us how Hashem guides our lives and the beauty of what it means to be a Jew and the beauty of what it means to celebrate a Purim with our friends and family and our loved ones. And then Ahapachu, Hashem could make every situation that we think is so bad, Hashem could turn it over in 1 second and bring the salvation. And Hashem could give us the greatest things. That's a celebration of Purim. I thank you so much for listening. I welcome you to join us for our next class, which is going to be class number 2, Bridging Relationships, about Mishloach Manos, coming soon. Thanks. I welcome your questions, comments, and sponsorships as well.